The wind howled across the desolate prairie as Faith Summers clutched her 5-year-old daughter's hand tightly, pulling their worn wagon to a halt at the edge of Redemption Creek. The year was 1877, and the Montana Territory offered little mercy to a young widow with a child. Faith's honey-blonde hair whipped across her face as she surveyed the dusty Main Street with tired blue eyes that had seen too much heartbreak for her 24 years. "Mama, are we home now?" Little Emma asked, her small voice barely audible above the creaking of wagon wheels and distant saloon piano. Faith forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. This is where we start again." The journey from St. Louis had drained their meager savings and Faith's spirit. Her husband Thomas had succumbed to tuberculosis 18 months ago, leaving her with nothing but memories, a curious daughter, and the address of a distant cousin who supposedly ran a boarding house in this frontier town. The promise of work and shelter had been enough to gamble their future on. Redemption Creek looked like every other boom town sprouting across the West, a haphazard collection of wooden buildings, muddy streets, and dreams built on equal parts desperation and hope. A general store, livery stable, and church stood alongside 3 saloons that seemed to be doing the most business on this Thursday afternoon. Mrs. Jenkins' boarding house should be just past the Mercantile, Faith murmured, checking the creased letter in her pocket once more. She clicked her tongue, urging their tired mare forward. The boarding house sat on the quieter end of the main street, a 2-story clapboard structure painted a faded blue with white trim. It wasn't grand, but it looked well maintained, with curtains in the windows and a small garden attempting to flourish despite the arid climate. Before Faith could climb down from the wagon, the front door swung open, revealing a plump woman in her 50s with graying hair tucked beneath a cap. "You must be Thomas's widow," the woman called out. "I'd recognize those Summers eyes anywhere. I'm Martha Jenkins, your husband's second cousin once removed." Faith helped Emma down from the wagon before turning to greet their new landlady. "Faith Summers, and this is Emma." "Thank you for offering us shelter, Mrs. Jenkins." Martha's warm hands clasped Faith's. "Call me Martha, dear. Family is family, distant or not. When I heard about Thomas, well—" She paused, her eyes softening as she knelt to Emma's level. "And who is this beautiful young lady?" Emma twisted the fabric of her worn dress, suddenly shy. "I'm Emma. I'm 5.5. Well, Emma, I've got freshly baked cookies inside for brave travelers. Would you like one?" The child's eyes widened as she nodded enthusiastically. A commotion from down the street drew their attention. Horses, hooves pounding against packed dirt, men's voices raised in boisterous laughter. A group of cowboys rode into town, dust billowing behind them as they headed toward the largest saloon. "The Circle T Boys," Martha explained. "Ranch hands coming in for supplies and entertainment. Their boss, Yates Turner, runs the biggest spread in the county." Faith noticed one rider lagging behind the others, a tall man with broad shoulders and a straight back. Unlike his companions, he didn't head for the saloon but continued down the main street toward the general store. Something about his solitary figure stirred something in Faith, but she quickly dismissed the feeling. "Let's get you two settled," Martha said, guiding them inside. "The position at the schoolhouse is still open if you're interested. The previous teacher left rather suddenly when gold was discovered over in Idaho." Faith's spirits lifted for the first time in months. "I would be very interested. I taught back in St. Louis before Emma was born." The boarding house was modest but clean, with a small parlor, dining room, and kitchen on the first floor. Martha led them upstairs to a room at the back of the house with 2 narrow beds, a washstand, and a window overlooking a small vegetable garden. "It's not much," Martha apologized, but it's quiet and clean." "It's perfect," Faith assured her, setting down their single trunk of possessions. After months on the road, sleeping in the wagon or cheap lodgings, this room felt like a palace. That evening at dinner, Faith met the other boarders, Mr. Peterson, an elderly clerk from the bank, Miss Dorothy Lane, who worked at the millinery shop, and the widow Holcomb, who spent her days reading and writing letters to her children back east. "You'll need to speak with Mayor Wilson about the teaching position," Mrs. Holcomb advised as they ate Martha's hearty beef stew. "School term is set to begin in 3 weeks, assuming they can find someone qualified." "I'll visit him tomorrow," Faith replied, helping Emma cut her meat into smaller pieces. The following morning dawned clear and cool. Faith dressed carefully in her one good dress, a navy blue cotton with only minimal signs of wear at the cuffs, and fixed Emma's hair with a fresh ribbon. "Remember your manners today," she instructed as they walked hand in hand toward the town hall. "This position is very important for us." Emma skipped alongside her mother. "Will I go to your school too, Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart. You'll be my student during the day and my helper after school." The town hall doubled as the mayor's office, a courthouse when the circuit judge came through, and a meeting place for various town committees. Mayor Wilson, a balding man with mutton chop sideburns and an expansive waistcoat stretched across his round belly, greeted them with practiced political warmth. "Mrs. Summers, Martha Jenkins sent word you might be applying for our teaching vacancy. Do sit down." Faith perched on the edge of a wooden chair, keeping Emma close by her side. "I understand the position begins soon. I taught for 3 years in St. Louis and have my teaching certificate." She extracted the carefully preserved document from her reticule. Mayor Wilson examined the certificate, nodding appreciatively. "Very good, very good. We've had trouble keeping teachers here. Young women tend to marry or move on to larger towns. Are you planning to stay in Redemption Creek long term, Mrs. Summers?" "Yes, sir. My husband has passed, and I'm looking to establish a permanent home for my daughter and myself." The mayor's eyes flickered briefly to Emma, who was quietly examining a glass paperweight on his desk. "I see. Well, the school has 15 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. The salary is $40 per month, with lodging included in the small cabin behind the schoolhouse." Faith's heart leaped. "There's housing provided, indeed. Nothing fancy, 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it's weatherproof and has its own well. Previous teachers have found it satisfactory." "That would be wonderful, Mayor Wilson. When might I see the schoolhouse?" The mayor stood, reaching for his hat. "No time like the present. It's just 3 blocks from here." The schoolhouse was a simple rectangular building with a small bell tower atop the pitched roof. 6 windows along each side provided ample light to the single large room filled with wooden desks arranged in rows. A pot-bellied stove stood in one corner, and a large chalkboard dominated the front wall. Though dusty from disuse, Faith could immediately see its potential. "The teachers' quarters are out back," Mayor Wilson explained, leading them through a rear door and across a small yard to a cabin nestled beneath 2 cottonwood trees. The cabin was basic but sound. A main room with a fireplace would serve as their living area, while a smaller room off to the side would be their bedroom. The lean-to kitchen had a cast iron stove, a dry sink, and shelves for provisions. "It's perfect," Faith breathed, already envisioning curtains at the windows and Emma playing beneath the trees. "School begins the first Monday of September," the mayor informed her, clearly pleased with her reaction. "That gives you 2 weeks to prepare. The school board will provide chalk, primers, and other basic supplies." As they walked back toward town, Emma tugged at Faith's hand. "Mama, I'm thirsty. We'll stop at the general store for a cool drink before heading back to the boarding house." Faith promised. Caldwell's general store was busy with ranchers, miners, and townspeople gathering supplies. Faith guided Emma carefully through the crowd to the counter where Mr. Caldwell, a lean man with spectacles perched on his nose, was measuring fabric for a customer. "Be with you in a moment, madam," he called, noticing Faith. While they waited, Emma wandered toward a barrel of candy sticks near the front window. Faith kept a watchful eye on her daughter while mentally calculating how much of their meager savings they could afford to spend on small comforts for their new home. The bell above the door jingled as a tall man entered, momentarily blocking the sunlight streaming through the window. Faith recognized him as the solitary rider she'd noticed yesterday, the one who hadn't followed his companions to the saloon. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing thick dark hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a startling shade of green that contrasted with his tanned skin. Emma, still examining the candy barrel, accidentally bumped into the man's long legs. "Excuse me, mister," she said, looking up at him with wide eyes. He smiled down at her, crouching to her level. "No harm done, little lady. Are you picking out a treat?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Mama said maybe one candy stick if it doesn't cost too much." The man's smile deepened, creating crinkles around his eyes. "Well, that sounds like a mighty important decision. Which color looks best to you?" Faith approached, slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry if my daughter is bothering you, sir." He stood, his full height towering over Faith's petite frame. "No bother at all, madam, just helping the young miss with a serious candy deliberation." He touched the brim of his hat. "Yates Turner, Faith Summers," she replied. "And this is my daughter, Emma." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You must be the new schoolteacher Martha Jenkins mentioned. Welcome to Redemption Creek." "Thank you. We've just arrived from St. Louis. That's quite a journey." His gaze was direct but not intrusive. "If you need anything while you're settling in, the Circle T is just 5 miles west of town." Before Faith could respond, the store's bell jingled again as 3 boys around 10 or 11 years old burst in, laughing and shoving each other. "Hey, Billy, bet you can't steal a licorice whip without old man Caldwell seeing," one dared loudly. "Hush up, Jimmy." Another boy whispered harshly, noticing the adults watching them. Mr. Caldwell frowned from behind the counter. "You boys behave yourselves, or I'll be having a word with your fathers." The boys straightened immediately, attempting to look innocent. Their attention soon shifted to Emma, who was still contemplating the candy barrel. "Who's that?" the tallest boy asked, nudging his friend. "New girl, I reckon," replied the freckled one called Jimmy. "Hey, girl, who are you?" Emma turned shyly. "I'm Emma Summers." The boys approached, curiosity overcoming their previous mischief. "I'm Jimmy Cooper. This here's Billy Matthews and Sam Wilson, the mayor's son." Emma nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." Sam, the mayor's son, looked her up and down with the casual cruelty children sometimes display. "Where's your pa?" Emma's small shoulders tensed. "He's in heaven." The boys exchanged glances. "You mean he's dead?" Billy asked bluntly. Faith stepped forward protectively. "Emma, have you decided which candy you'd like?" But the boys weren't finished. Sam leaned closer to Emma, his voice carrying clearly in the now quiet store. "My pa says kids need a father to grow up proper. Guess you'll grow up wild then." Emma's lower lip trembled. "Will not." "Will too," Sam retorted. "Everyone knows girls without past turn out wrong." "That's what my ma says about Lily at the saloon." Faith's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "That's quite enough," but before she could continue, Yates Turner stepped between the boys and Emma. His expression was stern but not unkind as he knelt down to Emma's eye level. "You know, Miss Emma, that's not true at all, and as for not having a father—" He paused, looking directly into the little girl's tear-filled eyes. You have won now." The store fell silent. Faith stared at the stranger in disbelief while Emma regarded him with cautious hope. "What do you mean, mister?" she asked in a small voice. Yates smiled gently. "I mean that sometimes fathers aren't just the men who help bring you into this world. Sometimes they are the men who promise to look out for you, to make sure you're safe and happy. And I'm promising that right now, if your mother allows it, I'd be honored to be a friend to you both." He turned his gaze to Faith, who found herself speechless at this unexpected declaration. There was nothing improper in his words, no overstepping of boundaries, just a simple offer of friendship and protection that was so rare in this harsh frontier world. "Mr. Turner, that's very kind," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He stood, facing the boys who now looked suitably chastened. "Sam Wilson, your father would be mighty disappointed to hear you speaking to a lady that way. A man's character isn't measured by who his parents are, but by how he treats others, especially those who might be going through hard times." Sam shuffled his feet, his bravado deflated. "Sorry, miss," he mumbled to Emma. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Why don't you boys run along now? I believe your mothers sent you for flour and sugar, not to harass newcomers." As the boys hurried to complete their errands, Yates turned back to Faith and Emma. With a smile, he reached into his pocket and placed a penny on the counter. "Miss Emma, I believe you were about to select a candy stick. Please allow me as a welcome to Redemption Creek." Emma looked to her mother for permission. Faith hesitated. She didn't want to accept charity, but neither did she want to reject this man's kindness in front of her daughter. "That's very generous, Mr. Turner, but please call me Yates, and it's just a penny candy, hardly worth fussing over." His easy smile was disarming, and Faith found herself nodding. Emma carefully selected a red and white striped stick, beaming as Mr. Caldwell wrapped it in paper for her. "Thank you, Mr. Yates," she said solemnly. "You're very welcome, Miss Emma." He turned to Faith. "Mrs. Summers, I understand you'll be moving to the schoolhouse soon. My ranch hands and I would be happy to help with any heavy lifting or repairs needed before you settle in." "That's not necessary. I insist. Consider it a community welcome." His green eyes held hers steadily. "We take care of our own in Redemption Creek." Faith wasn't sure when she and Emma had become part of our own, but the sentiment warmed her nonetheless. "Thank you. Perhaps some assistance with firewood for the winter would be appreciated. Consider it done. I'll have some men deliver a cord next week." He placed his hat back on his head, touching the brim in farewell. "Ladies, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you both around town." As he strode out of the store, Faith realized she was staring after him. Something about Yates Turner intrigued her, his quiet confidence, his kindness to Emma, the way he carried himself with dignity but without arrogance. It had been a long time since she'd noticed such things about a man. "I like him, Mama," Emma declared, happily clutching her candy stick. Faith smoothed her daughter's hair. "He seems very nice, sweetheart." "Is he really going to be like my papa now?" Faith's heart constricted. "Oh, Emma, he was just being kind. He meant he'd be a friend to us." Emma considered this, her young mind working through the nuances adults took for granted. "But friends can become family, right? Like Aunt Martha isn't really our aunt." "It's not quite the same, darling." Faith knelt down, meeting her daughter's earnest gaze. "Mr. Turner is just a man we met today. We shouldn't expect too much from him." But as they walked back to the boarding house, Faith couldn't help wondering about Yates Turner and his unexpected offer of friendship. In the harsh reality of the frontier, where survival often depended on community bonds, perhaps his gesture wasn't so unusual after all. Still, something about the intensity in his green eyes when he'd looked at Emma, and then at Faith suggested there might be more to the rancher than simple neighborly goodwill. For the next 2 weeks, Faith threw herself into preparing for the school term. She spent her days cleaning the schoolhouse, organizing books and supplies, and making the small cabin habitable for herself and Emma. Martha Jenkins provided invaluable help, introducing Faith to key members of the community and offering practical advice about frontier living. "Winters get mighty cold here," the older woman warned as they hung thick curtains in the cabin. "You'll want to bank that fire properly each night and keep extra blankets ready." Faith nodded, mentally adding wool blankets to her growing list of necessities. Her teaching salary would cover their basic needs, but little else. She would need to be frugal and resourceful. True to his word, Yates Turner sent 3 of his ranch hands to deliver a generous cord of split firewood, neatly stacked against the cabin's exterior wall. Faith was out when they arrived, but Martha supervised the delivery. "That Yates Turner sent more than double what he promised," Martha reported, her eyes twinkling. "Enough to last you most of the winter, I'd say." Faith flushed. "That's far too generous. I should pay him." "Nonsense. The man owns half the timber in the county. This cost him nothing but the labor, and his men need to keep busy anyway." Martha patted Faith's hand. "Let people help you, dear. There's no shame in accepting kindness." 3 days before school was to begin, Faith and Emma moved from the boarding house to their new home. The cabin was humble but now held touches that made it theirs, a patchwork quilt on the bed they would share, until Faith could afford a separate one for Emma, wildflowers in a jar on the table, and Emma's few treasured toys arranged on a shelf. That evening, as Faith was preparing a simple supper of beans and cornbread, a knock sounded at their door. Emma raced to answer it before Faith could stop her. "Mr. Yates," the child exclaimed. Faith hurriedly wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the doorway. Yates Turner stood on their small porch, hat in hand, looking somewhat uncertain, a change from his usual confident demeanor. Beside him was a younger man holding a large wooden crate. "Good evening, Mrs. Summers," Yates said, his deep voice sending an unexpected tremor through Faith. "I hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," Faith replied, though she was acutely aware of her disheveled appearance after a day of moving and unpacking. "Please come in." Yates stepped inside, followed by his companion. "This is Zach, one of my hands. We brought a few things that might be useful for your new home." Zach set the crate on the table at Yates's direction. Inside, Faith discovered a sack of flour, sugar, coffee, dried apples, a small ham, and, most surprising, books. Several children's books with colorful illustrations and 3 novels that appeared new. "Mr. Turner, this is far too generous," Faith protested, even as Emma excitedly examined the picture books. "The provisions are practical. Winter's coming, and the store sometimes runs low. As for the books—" He shrugged, almost sheepishly. "I ordered them from Denver months ago for the ranch library, but we've plenty. Thought they might be welcome here." Faith touched the spine of Little Women with longing. Reading had been her escape and comfort during the difficult months after Thomas died, but she'd been forced to sell most of their books to finance their journey west. "They're very welcome," she admitted softly. "Thank you." Yates nodded, seeming pleased. "How are you settling in?" "Any problems with the cabin?" "None. It's snug and sound. Your men did a wonderful job stacking the firewood." "Good, good." He glanced around the small space, his tall frame making it seem even more compact. "I also came to invite you both to Sunday dinner at the ranch. After church, if you're planning to attend." The invitation surprised Faith. Sunday dinner was typically a family affair, not something offered to near strangers. "That's very kind, but please, Mama," Emma interrupted, looking up from her new books. I want to see Mr. Yates's ranch. Does he have horses? Yates grinned down at her. More horses than you can count, Miss Emma, and a new litter of kittens in the barn that might need some attention from a gentle young lady. Emma's eyes widened. Kittens? Faith felt her resistance weakening. It had been so long since Emma had experienced simple joys like this. Well, I suppose we could come for a short visit after the service. Excellent. Yates's smile reached his eyes, creating those crinkles that Faith found herself noticing again. I'll have one of my men bring a buggy for you. The walk would be too far for little legs. After they departed, Emma clutched her new books to her chest. I like Mr. Yates, Mama. He's nice and he smells like pine trees. Faith laughed, stroking her daughter's hair. Does he now? And how would you know what pine trees smell like? From when he leaned down to show me the kitten pictures in my new book. Emma's expression turned serious. Do you think he meant it? About being like a papa to me, Faith sighed, sitting on their small sofa and pulling Emma onto her lap. Sweetheart, Mr. Turner was just being kind that day in the store. He wanted to make you feel better after those boys were mean. But he keeps being nice to us, and he invited us to dinner like families do. He's a generous man, Faith explained carefully. But that doesn't mean he's going to be your father. We barely know him. Emma rested her head against Faith's shoulder. I think he likes you, Mama. He looks at you the way Mr. Peterson looks at Miss Dorothy when she's not watching. Faith felt heat rising to her cheeks. Emma Summers. What an imagination you have. She gently set her daughter on her feet. Now help me put these groceries away, and then it's time for your bath. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Faith sat by the window with one of the new books open in her lap. But her thoughts kept drifting to Yates Turner, his unexpected generosity, his gentle way with Emma, the intensity in his green eyes when they met hers. It had been so long since she'd felt this strange fluttering in her chest, this awareness of herself as a woman rather than just a mother and survivor. Don't be foolish, she whispered to herself. He's just being neighborly. But as she finally closed the book and prepared for bed, Faith couldn't quite convince herself that neighborliness alone explained the warmth in Yates Turner's smile, or the way her heart had raced when he'd stood in her doorway, hat in hand, looking at her as if she were something precious. Sunday arrived clear and cool, with a hint of autumn in the air. Faith dressed Emma in her best dress, a blue calico with only one small patch at the elbow, and tied her dark curls back with a matching ribbon. For herself, Faith chose her navy Sunday dress and pinned her honey blonde hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Remember your manners in church, Faith reminded Emma as they walked the short distance to the white clapboard building at the edge of town. And stay close to me. The church was nearly full when they arrived, and Faith felt numerous curious gazes upon them as they slipped into a pew near the back. Martha Jenkins spotted them and waved, her friendly face a welcome sight among the sea of strangers. As the service began, Faith noticed Yates Turner sitting several rows ahead with a group of men she assumed were his ranch hands. He turned once, scanning the congregation, and when his eyes found hers, he nodded in acknowledgement. Faith quickly looked down at her hymnal, feeling oddly flustered. After the service, many townspeople approached to introduce themselves, particularly parents of school-age children. Faith did her best to remember names and faces, knowing these would be important relationships in her new community. Mrs. Summers, Mayor Wilson boomed, approaching with his wife and son Sam in tow. I trust you're settling in well. Yes, thank you, Faith replied politely, keeping a protective hand on Emma's shoulder as Sam eyed her warily. Mrs. Wilson, a thin woman with pinched features, assessed Faith with barely concealed judgment. We were quite concerned about finding a suitable teacher, Children need proper guidance, especially in moral matters. Faith met the woman's gaze steadily. I assure you, Mrs. Wilson, moral development is as important to me as academic progress. Before Mrs. Wilson could respond, Yates appeared at Faith's side. Mrs. Summers, Miss Emma, he greeted them, touching the brim of his hat. My buggy's out front whenever you're ready. Mrs. Wilson's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. You're going to the Circle T, Mrs. Summers. Mr. Turner kindly invited us for Sunday dinner, Faith explained, uncomfortable under the woman's scrutiny. How hospitable, Mrs. Wilson remarked, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Come along, Samuel. We mustn't keep your father waiting. As they walked away, Faith heard Mrs. Wilson murmuring something to her husband that made him frown. Don't mind Harriet Wilson, Yates said quietly. She considers herself the arbiter of propriety in Redemption Creek. And she clearly finds me lacking, Faith replied, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Yates's expression hardened slightly. Her opinions matter far less than she believes. Now shall we get going? My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, has been cooking since dawn, and she'll have my hide if we let her pot roast get cold. The Circle T ranch was more impressive than Faith had anticipated. A large two-story house of timber and stone stood at the center of the property, surrounded by various outbuildings, corrals, and a massive barn. Well-tended vegetable and flower gardens flanked the house, and a covered porch wrapped around three sides. It's beautiful, Faith murmured as Yates helped her down from the buggy. Been building it up for 10 years now, he replied, lifting Emma down with ease. Started with nothing but a claim and a handful of cattle. You've accomplished a great deal. Yates shrugged, but Faith could see the pride in his eyes as he surveyed his domain. Hard work and good luck. Come on inside, Mrs. Abernathy is eager to meet you both. Mrs. Abernathy proved to be a plump, cheerful woman in her 60s who immediately took Emma under her wing. Such a pretty little thing. Would you like to help me set out the dessert plates, dear? And then perhaps we can find those kittens Mr. Turner mentioned. Emma looked to Faith for permission, then happily followed the housekeeper to the kitchen, leaving Faith alone with Yates in the spacious living room. For the first time, Faith felt truly awkward in his presence, acutely aware that they were unchaperoned. Your home is lovely, she said, admiring the solid furniture and well-stocked bookshelves. Thank you. It was just a bachelor's quarters until Mrs. Abernathy came along 3 years ago and civilized the place. He gestured toward a chair. Please make yourself comfortable. Would you like something to drink? I have coffee, tea, or something stronger if you prefer. Tea would be lovely, thank you. As Yates moved to a sideboard to prepare the tea, Faith studied him covertly. He moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his body, confident in his surroundings. His dark hair was neatly trimmed for church, and his Sunday clothes, while not fancy, were of good quality and well fitted to his tall, muscular frame. How many men do you employ? She asked, seeking safe conversation. 12 full-time, more during roundup and branding. He handed her a delicate china cup filled with fragrant tea. Most live in the bunkhouse, but my foreman, Jake, has a small cabin near the south pasture. And you run cattle primarily, cattle and horses. Started breeding quarter horses about 5 years ago. They're becoming quite sought after for ranch work. He settled into a chair across from her. But that's enough about my operation. Tell me about yourself, Mrs. Summers. What brought you all the way from St. Louis to our little corner of Montana? Faith sipped her tea, gathering her thoughts. My husband Thomas died last year, tuberculosis. He was a teacher, as was I before Emma was born. After he passed, I took in sewing and laundry, but... She paused, remembering those desperate months of grief and struggle. It wasn't enough. When I learned Martha Jenkins was my husband's cousin and might help us find a fresh start, it seemed like providence. Yates's expression was sympathetic but not pitying. "You're a brave woman making such a journey alone with a child. Not brave, just determined." Faith set down her cup. "Emma deserves better than what I could provide in St. Louis. Here, at least, we have a home and I have respectable work. And you have friends," Yates added softly. "You're not alone here, Faith. May I call you Faith?" She nodded, warmed by the sound of her name on his lips. "Good. And I'm Yates to my friends." He leaned forward slightly. "I meant what I said to Emma that day in the store. I'd like to be a friend to you both, to help when I can, to make your transition to life here easier." "You've already been more than generous," Faith protested gently. "It's nothing compared to what you're doing shaping the minds of our community's children." His eyes held hers. "I admire your courage, Faith. Not many women would have the strength to do what you've done." Before Faith could respond, Emma burst into the room, her eyes shining with excitement. "Mama, I found the kittens. There are 5 of them and they're so tiny and soft." Yates laughed, breaking the moment of intensity between them. "Did Mrs. Abernathy show you the mother cat too?" Emma nodded vigorously. "Her name is Shadow because she's all black except for white paws. Can we have a kitten when they're bigger, Mama, please?" "We'll see, sweetheart." "Kittens are a big responsibility." "I could take real good care of one, I promise." "I'm sure you could," Yates interjected, winking at Faith. "And I happen to know Shadow would be happy to have one of her babies living at the schoolhouse, keeping the mice away from all those books." Emma beamed at this alliance. "See, Mama, it would be helpful." Faith couldn't help but smile at her daughter's enthusiasm. "We'll discuss it when the kittens are older." "Dinner is served, Mr. Turner," Mrs. Abernathy announced from the doorway. "And if I do say so myself, it's one of my better efforts." The dining room was as impressive as the rest of the house, with a long oak table that could easily seat 12. Only 4 places were set, however, with Yates at the head, Faith to his right, Emma beside her, and Mrs. Abernathy at the foot. "Mrs. Abernathy always joins me for Sunday dinner," Yates explained as he held Faith's chair. "Keeps me from feeling like a king holding court alone in this big room." The meal was indeed spectacular: tender pot roast with vegetables from the garden, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and pickled beets that Mrs. Abernathy proudly declared had won a ribbon at the county fair. For dessert, apple pie with thick cream delighted Emma so much she asked for seconds, which Mrs. Abernathy happily provided. After the meal, Yates suggested a tour of the ranch. "I'd like to show Emma the gentle mare I've been training. She might be ready for her first riding lesson if her mother approves." Emma's pleading eyes turned to Faith. "Oh, please, Mama, I've always wanted to ride a horse. Just around the corral with me leading the horse," Yates assured Faith. "Perfectly safe." Faith hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, but be careful." The afternoon passed pleasantly as Yates showed them around his property. Emma was delighted with her brief riding lesson on a patient chestnut mare named Penny, while Faith admired the well-organized operation Yates had built. The ranch hands they encountered treated their boss with obvious respect, but also an easy camaraderie that spoke well of his leadership. "You've created something remarkable here," Faith commented as they walked back toward the house, Emma skipping ahead to check on the kittens once more before they departed. "It's been my life's work," Yates admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I've focused too much on building and not enough on living." "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the sprawling property. "All this, the land, the cattle, the horses, it's what I wanted since I was a boy. But lately I've been thinking there should be more. A house needs a family to be a home." Faith's heart quickened at the wistful tone in his voice. "You're still young. There's time for that. Yates stopped walking, turning to face her. I'm 34, Faith, not so young anymore, and out here, eligible women aren't exactly plentiful. I find that hard to believe, Faith replied, trying to keep her tone light. Surely the most successful rancher in the county has had opportunities. A few, he acknowledged with a slight smile, but I've never been one to settle. When I marry, it will be for the right reasons, for companionship, respect, understanding. He paused, his green eyes searching hers. And love, of course. Faith felt a blush rising to her cheeks and turned away slightly. Those are good reasons. And you? Do you think you might consider marrying again someday? The question caught Faith off guard. I haven't thought about it. Emma has been my focus since Thomas died. Of course. Yates's tone was carefully neutral. I didn't mean to pry. You weren't, Faith assured him. It's a natural question. I suppose if the right person came along, someone who would be good to Emma as well as to me, I might consider it. But for now, establishing ourselves here is my priority. Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. A wise approach. As they continued walking, Faith felt a curious mixture of emotions, a flutter of attraction she hadn't experienced in years, tempered by caution born of hard experience. Yates Turner was unlike any man she'd met before, strong yet gentle, successful yet humble, and undeniably handsome in a rugged, weathered way that spoke of a life lived outdoors. But she had Emma to consider, and her own heart to protect. By the time they returned to town, the sun was beginning to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Yates helped them down from the buggy in front of their cabin. "Thank you for coming today," he said, his voice low and warm. "It was the most enjoyable Sunday I've had in a long while." "We had a wonderful time," Faith replied honestly. "Your hospitality was overwhelming." "Can we come again sometime?" Emma asked, clutching a small wooden horse Yates had carved for her during their visit. "Any time at all, Miss Emma." Yates knelt to her level. "And remember what I said about those kittens? One of them has your name on it when they're old enough to leave their mama." Emma threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive hug. "Thank you, Mr. Yates." Faith saw surprise, and then genuine pleasure cross Yates's face as he briefly returned the child's embrace. When he stood, his eyes met Faith's over Emma's head, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared affection for this small, resilient girl. "Good night, Faith," he said softly, touching the brim of his hat. "Good night, Yates, and thank you again." As she watched him drive away, Faith felt a curious mixture of contentment and apprehension. Somehow, in just a few weeks, Yates Turner had become important to them both. The thought was as frightening as it was thrilling. The first day of school arrived with perfect September weather, crisp morning air warming to a pleasant afternoon. Faith stood nervously at the teacher's desk, watching as 15 children of various ages filed into the schoolhouse, eyeing her with curiosity. Emma sat at a front desk, wearing her best dress and a ribbon Faith had splurged on at the Mercantile. She was the youngest student, but Faith had decided she was ready for basic lessons, particularly since keeping her at home alone wasn't an option. "Good morning, children," Faith began when everyone was seated. "I'm Mrs. Summers, your new teacher. I look forward to getting to know each of you as we learn together this year." The older students nodded politely, while the younger ones squirmed in their seats. Sam Wilson, sitting in the middle row, regarded Faith with the same pinched expression his mother often wore. Beside him, Jimmy Cooper and Billy Matthews whispered something that made Sam snicker behind his hand. "Mr. Wilson, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Matthews," Faith called firmly. "In this classroom, we give our full attention when someone is speaking. Is that understood?" The boys straightened, surprised at being addressed so directly. "Yes, madam," they mumbled in unison. Excellent. Now let's begin by introducing ourselves. Please stand when I call your name and tell us something about yourself. As the introductions proceeded, Faith began to get a sense of her students from 16-year-old Alice Henderson, who clearly wanted to be anywhere but school, to 7-year-old Peter Jenkins, Martha's grandson, who proudly announced he could recite the alphabet backward. When it was Emma's turn, she stood beside her desk, suddenly shy with all eyes upon her. "I'm Emma Summers. I'm 5 and a half. I like kittens." Sam Wilson smirked. "And she ain't got no paw," he whispered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Faith felt a surge of protective anger, but before she could speak, Alice Henderson turned in her seat to glare at Sam. "Hush your mouth, Sam Wilson. Not everyone's lucky enough to have both parents living." Sam's face reddened, but he fell silent under the older girl's rebuke. "Thank you, Emma," Faith said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And thank you, Alice, for reminding us all about kindness and respect. Those will be fundamental principles in our classroom." The rest of the day passed in a blur of assessments and organization, as Faith determined each student's academic level and established classroom routines. By the time she dismissed the children at 3 o'clock, she was exhausted but cautiously optimistic about the year ahead. As Faith erased the chalkboard while Emma practiced her letters at a desk, the schoolhouse door opened, admitting Martha Jenkins with a covered basket. "Thought you might be too tired to cook tonight," Martha explained, setting the basket on Faith's desk. "Just some chicken and dumplings, nothing fancy." "Martha, you're an angel," Faith sighed gratefully. "It's been quite a day, so I heard. Peter told me all about it on our walk home." Martha's eyes twinkled. "Including how you stood up to the Wilson boy when he tried to tease your Emma." Faith frowned. "I wish I could say it was me, but actually it was Alice Henderson who came to Emma's defense. I'm afraid the Wilson family doesn't think much of us." "Harriet Wilson doesn't think much of anyone who hasn't been in Redemption Creek for at least 3 generations," Martha scoffed. "And she's been particularly sour since she heard you visited the Circle T on Sunday." Faith's cheeks warmed. "It was just a neighborly invitation. Hum. Martha's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise. "A neighborly invitation from the most eligible bachelor in the county, a man who's never shown particular interest in any woman until now." "Martha, it's not like that at all. Yates Mr. Turner is just being kind to newcomers." "Is that why he rode by the schoolhouse twice today? Just being kind?" Faith stared at her. "He rode by, I didn't see him." "Well, you were busy with your students, but Peter noticed, and so did half the town, I'd wager." Martha patted Faith's hand. "It's nothing to be embarrassed about, dear. Yates Turner is a good man, hardworking, honest, and by all accounts a gentleman. And it's been nearly 2 years since Thomas passed." "I'm not looking for a husband," Faith protested. "I came here to make a new start for Emma and myself, to be independent." "Independence is all well and good, but a woman alone faces challenges a man doesn't." Martha's expression grew serious. "I'm not saying you should marry the first man who shows interest. I'm saying you shouldn't close your heart to possibilities because you're afraid of being hurt again." Faith sighed, glancing at Emma, who was now drawing pictures on her slate. "It's not just about me, Martha. Emma's already lost one father. I can't risk her becoming attached to someone who might not stay." "Fair enough," Martha conceded. "But from what I hear, Yates Turner isn't the type to make promises lightly. When he told your daughter she had a father now, I suspect he meant it in some fashion, whether as a friend, a protector, or perhaps something more in time." Before Faith could respond, the schoolhouse door opened again. This time it was Yates himself, hat in hand, looking slightly hesitant to find Faith not alone. "Mrs. Jenkins," he greeted Martha. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Not at all, Martha replied with a smile that was almost mischievous. I was just dropping off some supper for our hard-working teacher, but I should be getting back. Peter will be wondering where I've gone off to. She gathered her shawl around her shoulders. Faith, enjoy the chicken while it's hot. Good evening, Mr. Turner. As Martha bustled out, Emma spotted Yates and ran to him excitedly. Mr. Yates, I went to school today and I wrote my letters and I read a whole page by myself. Yates grinned, crouching down to her level. Did you now? That's mighty impressive, Miss Emma. Soon you'll be reading whole books. I already can read some of the ones you gave me, Emma declared proudly. Mama helps with the big words. I've no doubt you're the smartest student in the school. He glanced up at Faith, his green eyes warm. Though I suspect you have an excellent teacher. Faith smiled despite her lingering embarrassment from Martha's teasing. What brings you to town, Yates? Surely not to check on our first day of school. Actually, that's exactly why I'm here. He stood, his tall frame seeming to fill the modest schoolhouse. Thought I'd see how you both fared and... He hesitated, reaching into his coat pocket. I brought something for Emma. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden object, a delicately carved whistle in the shape of a bird. My father made one like this for me when I was about your age, Emma. If you blow gently, it sounds just like a meadowlark. Emma accepted the gift reverently, her eyes wide. When she blew softly as instructed, a sweet, warbling note filled the schoolhouse. It's beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Yates. You're welcome, little one. He ruffled her hair affectionately before turning back to Faith. And for you, Mrs. Summers, some practical news. The school board met yesterday and approved funds for new readers and arithmetic books. Mayor Wilson asked me to inform you since I was heading this way. That's wonderful news, Faith replied, genuinely pleased. Some of the books were so worn that pages were missing. Did they approve the slate boards I requested as well? Every item on your list, in fact. Wilson seemed impressed by your thorough preparation. Yates hesitated, then added, Not everyone on the board was initially in favor. Mrs. Wilson had some concerns about your, qualifications, but I was able to assure them of your excellent credentials. Faith raised an eyebrow. You're on the school board. Treasurer, he confirmed with a slight smile. Someone has to keep track of the money. The supplies should arrive by stagecoach next week. Thank you for your support, Faith said sincerely. It means a great deal to have the resources to teach properly. Yates nodded, his expression becoming more serious. There's something else I wanted to discuss with you, if you have a moment. Faith glanced at Emma, who was happily making her whistle sing different notes. Emma, why don't you take your whistle outside and practice while Mr. Turner and I talk? Stay where I can see you through the window. Once Emma had skipped outside, Faith turned back to Yates. Is something wrong? Not wrong exactly. He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. I heard there was some unpleasantness today with Sam Wilson regarding Emma. Faith sighed. Children can be thoughtless sometimes. It was handled by Alice Henderson, I understand, not by you. His tone was gentle, not accusatory. Faith, I want you to know that if any one child or adult gives Emma trouble about not having a father, you have my full support in setting them straight. That's very kind, but it's not kindness, he interrupted, his voice firm. It's basic decency. No child should be mocked for circumstances beyond their control. He paused, his expression softening. And no mother should have to defend her child's worth alone. Faith felt a lump forming in her throat. I appreciate that, Yates, truly. But I've been handling difficult situations on my own for some time now. I know you have, and you've done it admirably. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. But you don't have to anymore. Not here, not with me nearby. The intensity in his gaze made Faith's heart race. There was something in his expression, a tenderness, a yearning that both thrilled and frightened her. She wasn't ready for this, for the feelings he stirred in her. Yates, she faltered, unsure what to say. He seemed to sense her uncertainty and stepped back slightly, giving her space. I'm not asking for anything, Faith. I just want you to know that I meant what I said that day in the store. I'll be here for both of you in whatever capacity you'll allow. Before Faith could respond, Emma burst back through the door, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Mama, Mr. Yates. There's a kitty outside. I think it's lost. Sure enough, a small tabby cat was skulking near the woodpile beside the schoolhouse. It was thin but not emaciated, with bright eyes that suggested it was healthy despite its apparent homelessness. Poor thing, Faith murmured as they all observed the cat from the doorway. I wonder where it came from. Looks like one of the town's strays, Yates said. They usually keep to the alleys behind the saloons hunting mice. Can we keep it, Mama? Emma pleaded. Please, it needs a home. Faith hesitated. Sweetheart, we were going to wait for one of Shadow's kittens, remember, and this cat might belong to someone. I can ask around town, Yates offered, but I've never seen this one before if no one claims it. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Emma was already beaming with hope, and Faith knew she was fighting a losing battle. We'll put out some milk tonight, she conceded. If it's still here tomorrow, we can consider taking it in temporarily. Emma clapped her hands in delight. I'll get the milk. As she darted inside to fetch a saucer from their small kitchen, Yates chuckled. You're a soft touch, Mrs. Summers. Only where my daughter's happiness is concerned, Faith replied with a rueful smile, though I suspect I've just acquired another mouth to feed. If you need anything, we'll be fine, Faith assured him, perhaps too quickly. But thank you, Yates, for everything. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. I should get going. The ranch won't run itself. He settled his hat on his head, touching the brim in farewell. Good evening, Faith. Good evening. As he walked to where his horse was tethered, Emma ran back outside with a saucer of milk. Is Mr. Yates leaving? Yes, sweetheart. He has work to do. Emma set down the saucer near the woodpile, then dashed after Yates. Mr. Yates. Will you come see my kitty tomorrow if it stays? He turned, smiling down at her eager face. I'd like that very much, Miss Emma. And if it does stay, what will you name it? Emma considered this seriously. Maybe Whistle, because you gave me my whistle today, and that's when we found the kitty. Whistle is a fine name for a cat, Yates agreed solemnly. As he rode away, Faith watched Emma coaxing the stray cat toward the milk. Her daughter's capacity for joy, despite all they'd endured, never failed to amaze her. And now, seeing how quickly Emma had bonded with Yates Turner, Faith felt both grateful and apprehensive. The man was becoming important to them both, perhaps too important, too quickly. Yet there was something about him that inspired trust. His kindness seemed genuine, his interest in their welfare sincere. And though Faith was reluctant to admit it even to herself, the way he looked at her as if she were precious and desirable awakened feelings she'd thought long buried. Careful, Faith, she murmured to herself. Remember why you came here: to be independent, to make your own way. But as Emma's delighted laugh rang out when the cat finally approached to lap at the milk, Faith wondered if independence was truly more valuable than connection. Perhaps there was room in their new life for both. The weeks passed quickly as autumn deepened toward winter. Faith settled into her role as teacher, earning the respect of her students and most of their parents. Emma thrived both at school and at home, where the stray cat, now officially named Whistle, had taken up permanent residence, much to her delight. Yates Turner became a regular visitor, stopping by the schoolhouse or their cabin several times a week. Sometimes he brought practical gifts: a repaired chair, fresh venison after a hunting trip, or books for both Faith and Emma. Other times he simply came to talk, sharing stories of his day or asking about theirs. Faith found herself looking forward to his visits, planning her day around the possibility of seeing him. She told herself it was merely friendship, but Martha Jenkins's knowing smiles whenever Yates's name was mentioned suggested others saw it differently. "The whole town's talking," Martha informed her one crisp October afternoon as they walked back from the Mercantile. "Harriet Wilson is positively apoplectic that Yates Turner, the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, is courting the new schoolteacher instead of her niece from Helena." Faith nearly dropped her basket of supplies. "He is not courting me." "No. Then what would you call it when a man visits almost daily, brings gifts, and looks at a woman like she hung the moon?" "Friendship," Faith insisted, though her cheeks warmed. "Yates is kind to everyone." Martha snorted. "He doesn't bring venison to the widow Holcomb or read stories to Mayor Wilson's children. Face it, dear, the man is sweet on you, and on Emma too." Faith couldn't deny the latter. Yates treated Emma with a tenderness that sometimes brought tears to her eyes. He listened to her childish stories with genuine interest, taught her to ride the gentle mare he'd brought specifically for her lessons, and never failed to bring her small treasures: a pretty stone, a carved animal, or once, a tiny silver locket with just enough room for a miniature portrait. "That's from my mother," he'd explained when Faith protested it was too valuable a gift. "She'd want a sweet girl like Emma to have it." What Faith couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge aloud was how deeply she'd come to care for Yates. His visits were the highlight of her days, his rare absences keenly felt. When he smiled at her, her heart raced like a schoolgirl's. When their hands occasionally brushed as they worked together on some task, the contact sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "I'm not ready," she confessed to Martha now. "It's too soon, too complicated." Martha's expression softened. "Love is always complicated, dear, but sometimes it's worth the risk." "Who said anything about love?" Faith protested weakly. Martha merely patted her arm. "You didn't have to." That evening, as Faith prepared supper while Emma played with Whistle on the cabin floor, a knock sounded at their door. Emma scrambled up to answer it, knowing Yates's distinctive knock by now. "Mr. Yates," she cried, flinging herself at him with her usual enthusiasm. "Guess what? I read a whole chapter by myself today. Did you now?" He swung her up into his arms with practiced ease. "That's quite an accomplishment, Miss Emma. You'll be teaching the school yourself before long." "Don't be silly," she giggled. "Mom as the teacher. I'm going to be a horse trainer like you when I grow up." Faith smiled at their exchange as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Good evening, Yates. You're just in time for supper if you'd care to join us. Nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits." "Sounds perfect," he replied, setting Emma down gently. "Actually, I came with a purpose tonight. There's a harvest festival in Copper Creek this Saturday. Music, dancing, food. I thought perhaps you and Emma might like to attend, as my guests." Faith hesitated. Copper Creek was the next town over, about an hour's ride. Attending a social event with Yates would certainly fuel the town gossip Martha had mentioned. "It sounds lovely, but please, Mama," Emma interrupted. "I've never been to a festival." "It would be completely proper," Yates assured Faith, reading her hesitation correctly. "Mrs. Abernathy would accompany us as chaperone, and several families from Redemption Creek are planning to attend as well." Faith's reservations began to crumble. Emma deserved some fun after all they'd been through, and the thought of an evening of music and perhaps even dancing was admittedly appealing. "Very well," she agreed, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at Yates's delighted smile. "We'd be happy to accompany you." "Wonderful. I'll bring the wagon around at 2 o'clock on Saturday. The festival begins at 4, but we'll want to arrive early for good seats at the concert." As they sat down to supper, Faith found herself unusually aware of Yates's presence across the table, the breadth of his shoulders, the graceful strength of his hands, the way firelight caught in his dark hair. When he occasionally met her gaze, the warmth in his green eyes made her breath catch. Later, after Emma had been tucked into bed and Yates was preparing to leave, he paused at the door, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. "Faith, there's something I should tell you," he said quietly. "About the festival." "Oh." In these parts, when a man escorts a woman to a social event like this. He cleared his throat. "Well, it's generally understood to be a courtship gesture." Faith's heart raced. "I see. If that makes you uncomfortable, we can certainly present it differently, as friends, neighbors." "And is that how you see us, Yates? As friends and neighbors?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He stepped closer, his expression serious. "You know it's not. At least, not on my part." Faith found herself unable to look away from his intense gaze. "It's been less than 3 months since we met. I know." His voice was soft, almost reverent, "and yet I feel as if I've known you much longer. From that first day in the store, when you stood so proudly despite Sam Wilson's cruelty to Emma, I knew you were someone special." "Yates, you don't need to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for declarations or promises. I just wanted to be honest about my intentions. When we attend the festival together, people will assume I'm courting you, and they'll be right if you'll allow it." Faith took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "Emma adores you," she said finally. "And I care for you deeply, but I came here to build an independent life, to show my daughter that a woman can stand on her own. Independence and love aren't mutually exclusive, Faith." He reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. "A partnership between equals can make both stronger." The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her. "I need time, Yates. This is all happening so quickly." "Then time is what you'll have." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm a patient man, Faith Summers. I'll wait as long as you need." After he left, Faith stood by the window, watching his tall figure disappear into the darkness. Her hand still tingled where his lips had touched it, and her heart felt too full for her chest. "A partnership between equals," she whispered, testing the words. It was a beautiful concept, so different from what many marriages became, with wives subordinate to husbands' wishes. Could such a relationship truly exist? And was she brave enough to find out? Saturday dawned clear but cold, with a hint of snow in the air. Faith dressed Emma in her warmest clothes, thankful for the new woolen coat Martha had helped her sew using fabric purchased with her teaching salary. For herself, Faith chose her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and arranged her honey blonde hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun. "You look pretty, Mama," Emma observed as Faith pinned the last strand in place. "Like a princess in my storybook." Faith smiled, touching her daughter's cheek. "Thank you, sweetheart. Now let's make sure Whistle has enough food and water while we're gone." Promptly at 2 o'clock, Yates arrived with a covered wagon rather than the open buggy he usually drove. Mrs. Abernathy sat on the bench beside him, bundled in a heavy coat and scarf. "Thought we'd be more comfortable with some protection from the wind," he explained as he helped Faith and Emma up into the wagon. Thick blankets lined the bench seats, and heated bricks wrapped in flannel had been placed on the floor to warm their feet. "Very thoughtful," Faith replied, settling Emma between herself and Mrs. Abernathy. As they drove out of town, Faith noticed several curious gazes following their departure, including Harriet Wilson's disapproving frown from the mercantile doorway. But for once, Faith didn't care what others thought. The crisp autumn day, the anticipation of the festival, and Yates's steady presence beside her combined to create a sense of happiness she hadn't felt in years. The Harvest Festival in Copper Creek exceeded even Emma's excited expectations. The town square had been transformed with colorful bunting, lanterns strung between buildings, and stalls selling everything from roasted nuts to handcrafted toys. A bandstand in the center hosted musicians playing lively tunes, while children darted about playing games and adults chatted in groups, greeting friends and neighbors. "Ice cream!" Emma exclaimed, spotting a vendor with a hand-cranked freezer. "Can I have some, Mama, please?" "It's a bit cold for ice cream, don't you think?" Faith laughed. "Never too cold for ice cream," Yates declared solemnly. "1 scoop or 2, Miss Emma?" "2," she replied without hesitation. Faith started to protest, but Yates winked at her. "It's a special occasion." As he and Emma went to purchase the treat, Mrs. Abernathy chuckled beside Faith. "He's good with her." "Yes, he is," Faith agreed softly. "Better than I could have hoped for. He'd make a fine father." The older woman's shrewd eyes assessed Faith. "And a fine husband, too, if you don't mind my saying so." Faith flushed. "Mrs. Abernathy, call me Betty, please. And don't worry, I'm not prying. Just stating facts as I see them." She patted Faith's hand. "Known Yates Turner for 3 years now. Never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you." Before Faith could respond, Yates and Emma returned, the child happily licking a large scoop of vanilla ice cream. "They had strawberry too, Mama. Do you want to try some?" "Perhaps later, sweetheart." Faith accepted the handkerchief Yates offered as Emma's ice cream began to drip. "Let's not get your new coat all sticky." They spent the next hour exploring the festival, with Emma's excitement growing at each new discovery. She tried her hand at apple bobbing, with limited success but much giggling, watched in awe as a blacksmith demonstrated horseshoe making, and clapped enthusiastically during a short play performed by the local schoolchildren. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit throughout the square, creating a magical glow. The band began playing waltzes and other dance tunes, and a space was cleared for couples to dance. "Mrs. Abernathy," Yates said formally, "would you mind keeping an eye on Miss Emma while I ask her mother for a dance?" "Be my pleasure," Betty replied with a wink at Faith. "Come along, Emma. I believe I saw a gingerbread stand over yonder." As they walked away, Yates turned to Faith, extending his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Summers?" Faith hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "You may, Mr. Turner." He led her to the edge of the dancing area, then drew her into a proper waltz position, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers, with a respectable distance between their bodies. As they began to move to the music, Faith was surprised to discover Yates was an excellent dancer. "You dance very well," she commented, relaxing into his lead. "Not what I expected from a rancher." He smiled down at her, his green eyes reflecting the lantern light. "My mother insisted I learn. Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a buffalo, embarrassing himself and his partner. She sounds like a formidable woman." "She was." A shadow of old grief crossed his face. "She passed when I was 15, influenza. My father followed 3 years later." "I'm sorry, Yates." "You were so young to lose them both." He nodded, guiding her through a graceful turn. "It was difficult, but they left me with a strong foundation and the beginnings of what became the Circle T. I like to think they'd be proud of what I've built." "I'm sure they would be," Faith said softly. "Not just the ranch, but the man you've become." Something in his expression shifted, intensified. "And what kind of man is that, Faith?" She met his gaze steadily, suddenly certain of her words. "A good one, kind, honorable, the kind of man a woman could build a life with." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Faith, I've been thinking about what you said about partnership between equals, about patience. She took a deep breath. I don't need more time, Yates. These past months have shown me who you are, and I care for you deeply. The music seemed to fade away as Yates stared down at her, wonder and joy dawning in his eyes. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying yes to your courtship, to whatever may come after. I'm saying I trust you, not just with my heart but with Emma's as well. For a moment, Faith thought he might kiss her right there in front of the entire gathering. Instead, he squeezed her hand and continued their dance, though his eyes never left hers. You've made me the happiest man in Montana territory, he said simply. Perhaps in all the western states. Faith laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. That's quite a claim, Mr. Turner. I can back it up, he assured her, his smile radiant. Just wait and see. When the music ended, they found Emma and Mrs. Abernathy watching the dancing from a bench near the bandstand. Emma's face was sticky with gingerbread, but her eyes were bright with excitement. Mama, you looked so pretty dancing with Mr. Yates, like in a fairy tale, Faith laughed, wiping her daughter's face with a dampened handkerchief. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you enjoying the festival? It's the best day ever, Emma declared emphatically. Can we come back next year? Yates knelt beside her, his expression serious. I think that can be arranged, Miss Emma. In fact, I hope we can make it a family tradition. Emma's eyes widened. A family tradition? You mean like we'd be a family? Faith held her breath, uncertain how Yates would respond to such a direct question. He glanced up at her, seeking permission, and she gave a slight nod. Well, Miss Emma, he said carefully, that's something your mother and I will need to discuss. But I want you to know that I care very deeply for both of you, and nothing would make me happier than for us to be a family someday. Emma considered this solemnly, then nodded. I'd like that. Whistle too. Whistle too, Yates agreed with a laugh, standing up. Now, I believe they are about to start the lantern release. Shall we go watch? As they moved toward the center of the square, Yates took Faith's hand in his, entwining their fingers. The simple gesture, performed openly in public, was as much a declaration as words could have been. Faith squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of rightness that transcended her lingering fears. The next few months passed in a happy blur. Yates courted Faith properly, with regular visits, Sunday dinners, and occasional outings to neighboring towns. As winter descended on Montana, bringing heavy snow and bitter cold, he made sure Faith and Emma's cabin was well stocked with firewood and provisions. Faith continued teaching, earning the respect of even her most skeptical parents as their children's progress became evident. Emma thrived both at school and at home, where Whistle had been joined by one of Shadow's kittens, a black fluff ball Emma named Meadow after the meadowlark Whistle Yates had carved for her. Christmas approached with mounting excitement. The schoolhouse closed for 2 weeks, and Faith devoted herself to creating a special holiday for Emma. They baked cookies using precious sugar Martha had helped them obtain, strung popcorn garlands for their small pine tree, and wrapped modest gifts in brown paper brightened with red yarn bows. On Christmas Eve, Yates arrived with his arms full of parcels and a fir tree strapped to his horse's saddle, a much larger, fuller tree than the small one Faith had managed to drag home herself. "Merry Christmas," he called as Emma flung open the door, squealing with delight at the sight of the magnificent tree. "It's so big, and it smells so good," she exclaimed, dancing around him as he maneuvered the tree inside. Faith laughed, moving their smaller tree aside. "Yates, this is too much." "Where will we put it?" "Right here by the window," he declared, already setting it up in the stand he'd brought. "Every child deserves a proper Christmas tree." Together, they decorated the tree, Transferring the popcorn garlands from the smaller tree and adding glass ornaments, Yates had brought family heirlooms, he explained, that had been packed away since his parents' deaths. They should be enjoyed, he said simply, when Faith protested that they were too valuable to risk around a child and 2 kittens. My mother would have wanted it this way. After Emma was finally asleep, vibrating with anticipation for the morning, Faith and Yates sat before the fire, mugs of spiced cider in hand. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional purr from Whistle, curled on the hearth rug. "I have something for you," Yates said finally, reaching into his coat pocket. "A Christmas gift I'd prefer to give you privately." He handed her a small package wrapped in fine paper and tied with a silk ribbon. Faith unwrapped it carefully to reveal a velvet box. Inside was a gold locket on a delicate chain similar to the one he'd given Emma, but larger and more intricately engraved. "It's beautiful," Faith whispered, opening the locket to find it empty. "Thank you, Yates. It was my grandmother's," he explained. "I thought perhaps someday it might hold miniatures of us, you, me, Emma. A family portrait of sorts." The implication was clear, and Faith's heart raced. They'd spoken often of their feelings for each other over the past months, but never explicitly of marriage. Now, as she looked into Yates's hopeful green eyes, she knew the moment had come. "Yates," she began, then paused, gathering her courage. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" He took her hands in his, the locket still nestled between their palms. "I had a whole speech prepared," he admitted with a rueful smile. "About how I've loved you since that first day, how you and Emma have brought joy and purpose to my life in ways I never imagined possible." "That sounds like a lovely speech," Faith murmured, her eyes misting. "The truth is simpler than any speech," Yates continued. "I love you, Faith Summers. I love your strength, your kindness, your devotion to Emma. I love the way you've created a home here through sheer determination. I love your mind, your heart, your spirit." He took a deep breath. "And I would be honored beyond words if you would consent to be my wife." Faith felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Yates Turner, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he leaned forward, cupping her face in his hands. "May I kiss you, Faith? I've been wanting to since the Harvest Festival." "I've been wanting you to since then as well," she confessed, her cheeks flushing. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a meeting of lips that quickly deepened as months of restrained emotion found release. Faith felt herself melting into him, her hands clutching his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he murmured again, as if he couldn't say it enough now that the words had been spoken. "And I love you," Faith replied, the words coming easily now. "More than I thought possible." They agreed to tell Emma in the morning as a Christmas gift more precious than any wrapped package. As Yates reluctantly prepared to leave, propriety still demanding separation, until their marriage, he paused at the door. "When shall we marry? Spring would be traditional, but I find myself unwilling to wait that long." Faith considered this. "The school term ends in 2 weeks for a winter break." "Perhaps then. It would give us time to prepare, but not too long." 2 weeks, Yates agreed, his smile suggesting even that was longer than he'd prefer. "January 5th. I'll speak to Reverend Collins tomorrow." Their goodbye kiss was briefer than the first, but no less sweet. As Faith watched him ride away through gently falling snow, she touched the locket now hanging around her neck. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt truly hopeful about the future, not just surviving, but living fully, loving deeply. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, with sunlight glinting off fresh snow. Emma woke Faith at dawn, bouncing on the bed with excitement. "Mama, Santa came. There are presents under the tree." Faith blinked awake, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Are there indeed? Well, we should investigate immediately." Under the tree were the gifts. Faith had prepared a new dress she'd sewn late at night, a rag doll with yarn hair, and a picture book from the mercantile. But there were additional packages as well, wrapped in colorful paper Faith hadn't seen before. "Mr. Yates must have left these," she realized aloud. "Wasn't that thoughtful?" Emma tore into the gifts with abandon, squealing with delight at each revelation. A child-sized saddle. "For your riding lessons," the attached note explained. A wooden farm set with tiny animals and a beautiful illustrated edition of fairy tales. "Santa was very generous this year," Faith remarked, watching her daughter arrange the wooden animals in careful rows. "It wasn't just Santa," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Mr. Yates helped too. He told me so when he tucked me in last night." Faith laughed. "Did he now?" "Well, Mr. Yates and I have a special surprise for you too, something that's not under the tree." Emma looked up, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Faith sat on the sofa, patting the space beside her. When Emma joined her, she took her daughter's small hands in hers. "How would you feel if Mr. Yates became a permanent part of our family? If he became your papa?" Emma's eyes widened. "You mean, you're going to marry him?" "Yes, sweetheart. He asked me last night and I said yes. We'll be married in 2 weeks, just after school breaks for winter. The 3 of us will live together at the Circle T. And Whistle and Meadow too, of course. They're family too." Emma launched herself into Faith's arms, hugging her tightly. "This is the best Christmas ever. I'm going to have a papa just like you promised." Faith held her daughter close, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "I didn't promise that, Emma." "Yes, you did," Emma insisted. "When we first came here, you said maybe someday we'd find someone who would love us both, and we did. Mr. Yates loves us and we love him." "Yes," Faith agreed softly. "We certainly do." A knock at the door announced Yates's arrival for Christmas breakfast. Emma flew to answer it, throwing herself into his arms the moment he stepped inside. "Mama told me. You're going to be my papa for real." Yates caught her up in a hug, his eyes meeting Faith's over Emma's head. "That's right, Miss Emma. If that's all right with you, it's the best Christmas present ever," Emma declared. "Even better than the saddle," Yates laughed, carrying her into the cabin. "I'm glad to hear that. And there's more good news if you and your mother agree. We thought we might have the wedding at the ranch. Mrs. Abernathy is already planning a feast, and we could invite the whole town to celebrate with us." "The whole town?" Faith echoed, surprised. "That's rather a large gathering." "It's not every day the most eligible bachelor in the county gets married," Yates replied with a wink. "Besides, I want everyone to witness how fortunate I am to have won the hand of the most beautiful, intelligent woman in Montana Territory." "And me," Emma added. "You get me too." "Indeed I do," Yates agreed solemnly. "The greatest blessing of all." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Faith finished the school term while simultaneously planning a wedding, packing their belongings, and preparing Emma for the changes ahead. Yates, meanwhile, threw himself into readying the ranch house for his new family, adding curtains to the windows, having a bedroom painted in Emma's favorite shade of blue, and clearing space in his library for Faith's books. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Redemption Creek, eliciting reactions that ranged from Martha Jenkins's delighted approval to Harriet Wilson's barely concealed displeasure. Most of the town seemed genuinely happy for them, however, and acceptances to the wedding celebration poured in. On the morning of January 5, 1878, Faith stood in Martha's guest room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her wedding dress, hastily sewn by Martha and Dorothy Lane, from the finest fabric the mercantile could provide, was simple but elegant, its ivory satin complementing Faith's honey blonde hair and fair skin. "You look beautiful, dear," Martha said, adjusting the small wreath of winter berries and evergreen that crowned Faith's upswept hair. "Yates won't know what hit him." Faith smiled nervously. "I still can't quite believe this is happening. 6 months ago, I arrived here with nothing but hopes and prayers. And now you're marrying the most prosperous rancher in the county, with a home and future secure for you and Emma." Martha squeezed her shoulders. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." A soft knock at the door revealed Emma, resplendent in a new dress of pale blue silk, a gift from Yates. "Mama, you look like an angel. Mr. Yates, I mean Papa, is already at the ranch with Reverend Collins. Mrs. Abernathy sent a buggy for us." "Then we shouldn't keep them waiting," Faith replied, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I've been ready forever." The ride to the Circle T was magical, with the winter landscape sparkling in the midday sun. As they approached the ranch, Faith saw dozens of wagons and buggies already parked in the yard, and lanterns hung from every tree leading to the house. Inside, the furniture had been moved to create a space for the ceremony in the large living room. A path of evergreen boughs led to where Yates stood before the fireplace with Reverend Collins, looking more handsome than Faith had ever seen him in a new black suit and crisp white shirt. When their eyes met across the room, everything else seemed to fade away: the murmuring guests, the crackling fire, even Emma's excited whispers. There was only Yates, his green eyes shining with love and promise as she walked toward him on Martha's arm. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Faith remembered the warmth of Yates's hands holding hers, the tenderness in his voice as he recited his vows, and the moment when Emma joined them for a special blessing, symbolizing their union as a family. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder," Reverend Collins declared. "You may kiss your bride." Yates's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, appropriate for the public setting yet conveying the depth of his feelings. When they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, the room erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tables groaning under the weight of Mrs. Abernathy's feast, music provided by local fiddlers, and dancing in the cleared barn. Faith found herself passed from partner to partner as tradition demanded, but her eyes always sought out Yates, who seemed equally unable to look away from her. As the night grew late, Emma began to droop despite her determination to stay awake for every moment of the celebration. Faith found her curled in a chair near the fire, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Time for bed, I think," Faith said softly, stroking her daughter's hair. "But it's my wedding too," Emma protested sleepily. "I want to stay with you and Papa." Yates appeared beside them, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Tell you what, Miss Emma, how about I carry you up to your new room, the blue one we prepared just for you, and your mama and I will both tuck you in. Then tomorrow we'll have a special breakfast, just the three of us, to celebrate our first day as a family." Emma considered this compromise. With pancakes," Yates confirmed solemnly. "And maple syrup." "Okay," she agreed, holding up her arms to be carried. Yates lifted her easily, and the three of them slipped away from the celebration, climbing the stairs to the second floor of the ranch house. Emma's room was indeed painted a soft blue, with a canopied bed that made her gasp with delight despite her exhaustion. "It's like a princess room," she exclaimed as Yates set her down. "For our princess," he replied, exchanging a smile with Faith. Together they helped Emma change into her nightgown, tucked her beneath the quilt Mrs. Abernathy had made specially, and listened to her prayers, which now included thanks for my new papa and our new home and Whistle and Meadow who are coming tomorrow. "Good night, sweetheart," Faith whispered, kissing her forehead. "Sleep tight." "Good night, Papa," Emma murmured, already drifting off. "I love you." Yates's voice was husky with emotion as he replied, "I love you too, Emma, more than you can know." As they quietly closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar so Emma wouldn't wake frightened in the unfamiliar room, Yates turned to Faith, taking her hands in his. "We should return to our guests," she said softly, though part of her wished they could simply stay in this moment, the three of them in their new home, the rest of the world forgotten. "They'll manage without us for a few minutes," Yates replied, drawing her closer. "I haven't had a moment alone with my wife all day." The word wife sent a thrill through Faith. "Well, husband, what did you have in mind?" His smile was both tender and mischievous as he bent to kiss her, a proper kiss this time, without the restraint their public ceremony had demanded. Faith melted against him, her arms winding around his neck as his encircled her waist, pulling her flush against his solid warmth. When they finally parted, both breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I've been waiting to do that properly for months." "It was worth the wait," Faith murmured, her cheeks flushed. "Faith Turner," he said, testing the name. "My wife, the mother of my children Emma now and perhaps others in time." The thought of expanding their family sent a warm glow through Faith. "I'd like that," she admitted. "Emma has always wanted siblings." "And I've always wanted a house full of children," Yates replied, his eyes crinkling with his smile. "But first things first, we have guests waiting, a wedding to finish celebrating." "And then?" Faith asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His green eyes darkened with promise. "And then, Mrs. Turner, we begin our life together properly, completely, forever." "Forever," Faith echoed, sealing the promise with another kiss. 5 years later, Faith sat on the porch of the Circle T ranch house, watching as Yates taught 10-year-old Emma and her younger brother, 3-year-old Thomas, how to gentle a new foal. The spring sun warmed her face as she cradled her newest child, 1-month-old Sarah, against her chest. "Careful, Thomas," Yates called as the little boy reached eagerly for the foal's nose. "Remember what I taught you about approaching from the side, letting him see you coming." Emma, now a confident young horsewoman, demonstrated the proper technique for her brother. "Like this, Tommy, see." Slow and easy. Faith smiled, her heart full as she watched her family. The years since her marriage to Yates had brought more joy than she could have imagined that day in Caldwell's general store when a tall rancher had knelt before her tearful daughter and promised her a father. Yates had kept that promise and so many more. He was a devoted father to Emma, never treating her differently from their biological children, and a loving husband whose partnership with Faith had only deepened with time. The Circle T had prospered under their joint stewardship. Faith had continued teaching for 2 years after their marriage, until Thomas's birth made the daily journey to town impractical. Now she managed the ranch's finances and correspondence while Yates handled the day-to-day operations, their complementary skills creating a thriving enterprise. Redemption Creek had grown as well, with a new bank, a proper doctor's office, and even a small hotel for travelers on the expanding railroad. Martha Jenkins still ran her boarding house, though she'd taken on a partner in Dorothy Lane after the latter's marriage to Mr. Peterson from the bank. Harriet Wilson had eventually warmed to Faith, particularly after Faith organized a successful fundraiser for a new church bell. Even Sam, Wilson had matured into a respectful young man who often sought Yates's advice about ranching and occasionally helped with the Circle T horse training program. As Faith watched, Yates lifted Thomas onto his shoulders to give him a better view of the foal, the little boy's delighted laughter carrying across the yard. Emma, tall and graceful for her age, demonstrated the proper way to offer an apple to the nervous young horse. "You have a fine family, Mrs. Turner." Faith turned to find Mrs. Abernathy Betty standing in the doorway with a tray of lemonade and cookies. "The finest," Faith agreed, adjusting sleeping Sarah in her arms. "Thanks to you in part. You welcomed us so warmly that first day." Betty waved away the gratitude as she set the tray on the small table. Anyone with eyes could see what was happening. That man waited a long time for the right woman, and when he found her, he knew it immediately. "Did he?" Faith asked, curious. "He never told me that." "Oh, yes. The day after you arrived in town, he came home from the store and announced to me, Betty, 'I've met the woman I'm going to marry.' Just like that, bold as brass." The older woman chuckled at the memory. "When I asked who this paragon might be, he said, 'The new schoolteacher with the little girl who needs a father.'" Faith felt tears pricking her eyes. "He never told me that. Probably thought it would frighten you off," Betty replied with a wink. "Smart man, our Yates. Knew he had to go slow. Let you come to trust him on your own terms." "The best decision I ever made," Faith murmured, watching as Yates now helped Emma lead the foal in a small circle, Thomas following with careful steps. As if sensing her gaze, Yates looked up, his green eyes finding hers across the yard. Even after 5 years of marriage, that look still made Faith's heart race. He smiled that special smile he reserved just for her and gestured for her to join them. "Let me take the little one," Betty offered, holding out her arms for Sarah. "You go on. That new foal should meet the whole family." Faith carefully transferred the sleeping infant to Betty's experienced arms, then made her way across the yard to where her husband and older children waited. As she approached, Yates slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her close to his side. "What do you think of our newest addition?" he asked, nodding toward the dappled gray foal now cautiously nuzzling Emma's outstretched hand. "Beautiful," Faith replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just like everything on this ranch." "Not as beautiful as its mistress," Yates murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Thomas tugged at Faith's skirt. "Mama, I pet the horse too." "Did you, sweetheart? How wonderful." She knelt to his level, admiring his achievement. "Papa says he might be my horse someday when I'm bigger like Emmy." "A fine mount he'll make too," Yates agreed, ruffling his son's dark hair so like his own. "But that's a few years off yet, young man." As they stood together in the spring sunshine, Faith remembered that moment in Caldwell's store 5 years earlier, a frightened little girl mocked for having no father, a stranger kneeling to offer comfort and protection, a promise made and kept beyond all expectation. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked softly, noticing her reflective expression. Faith smiled up at him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such happiness. "I was thinking about beginnings, about how the hardest journeys sometimes lead to the most beautiful destinations." Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. "From St. Louis to Redemption Creek, from grief to joy, from strangers to family," Faith added. "From that moment in the store when you told Emma she had a father now." "The truest words I ever spoke," Yates replied, drawing her closer. "Though I didn't yet know how completely you both would change my life." As Emma led the foal in another careful circle, with Thomas following in her footsteps and baby Sarah sleeping peacefully in Betty's arms on the porch, Faith leaned into her husband's embrace, savoring the perfect moment. "I love you, Yates Turner," she whispered, "more with each passing day." "And I love you, Faith Turner," he replied, his voice deep with emotion. "You and our children are the greatest blessing I could have imagined." Together they watched their children, their legacy, their future, a family forged not just by blood, but by choice, by promise, by love that had grown from the seed of a stranger's kindness into a life more beautiful than either could have dreamed.